My name's Eugene Worley, and along with my wife Glenda, we have spent nearly 50 years in ministry in Ethiopia, Norway, the UK, and in the US. I'd like in these podcasts to share with you some of our experiences from those years.
Podcast number 21, Dealing with Family Issues Back Home. When we arrived in Ethiopia in 1998, Jean's dad had recently passed away, and my dad was in a nursing facility. Ron and his family were living in Norway, and Kathy and her family were outside of Atlanta. We were anxious to get to Ethiopia, but it was rather sad to leave my dad in a nursing facility. He had had several strokes and could not be cared for at home. My mom and brother were so faithful in visiting him. In fact, my mom was usually with him all day, every day. We really understood the sacrifice our parents made when we went to Ethiopia in 1967 in telling us and their only grandchild goodbye. Our lives changed as we traveled to Ethiopia, however, theirs remained the same. They had a void in their lives by our absence, but never complained. Now, some 30 years later, leaving our parents was an even greater challenge, considering their age and their health. Despite that, we trusted God to take care of them, as they had trusted God 30 years earlier to take care of us. February 1999 brought some changes to our family situation. My dad was not doing well at all, and I knew that my brother had the full responsibility on him, though he never complained. At the same time, we received an email from our daughter Kathy, who was going through a very difficult time. She wrote, "Dad, I've never asked you to leave your ministry, but right now I need your help." She had some real needs. So, as all parents would do, we made plans to return to the States. Most of the time, I stayed in North Carolina with my family to relieve them of some duties with my dad. Jean stayed in Atlanta with our daughter, with her 4 young children, as our son-in-law's work required him to fly out each week. Jean was such a patient, loving dad and granddad, and he did a great job as granddad nanny. They did not miss a Sunday at church, and on Easter Sunday after church, he took all 4 kids to a restaurant for lunch. Everyone in the restaurant was amazed at his care. I'm sure, though, that when they went to church, he was happy for the nursery and Sunday school classes when he got a reprieve. I would fly down every couple of weeks to help, but most of my time was spent with my dad in North Carolina. We were so thankful when Kathy came home from the hospital and was able to manage on her own. My dad was in and out of the hospital during those times, and I was so privileged to be able to sit with him and care for him. When he was able to talk, we reminisced over the years, and it was a special time for both of us. In July, we knew we had to return to Ethiopia, and we were ready to go, though my dad's condition remained the same. The night I told my dad goodbye was very difficult. He knew, and I knew, that this would be our final goodbye, and the next time we saw each other would be in heaven. Jean bought me a round-trip ticket so I would be able to return for the funeral. Our visas at the time allowed us to come and go without having to go through any paperwork to get an exit visa. We jumped right back into the ministry and were as busy as ever. God was good to allow us some breathing room to be there for our family when they needed us. November came and we had a wonderful blessing. Our son Ron, who was 6 when we left Ethiopia in 1971, returned for a visit. He came with his family, Vivian, Kai, and Isla. They lived in Norway and came for a 3-week visit. What a special treat that was. They arrived at night, which for our grandkids, Kai and Isla, was scary. They were not used to seeing policemen with guns and homes in a compound with a guard. Our house was enclosed with a block wall with barbed wire on top of it. Then there were the bars on both windows and the doors, and it all terrified them. Kai was 9, and Isla was 6. They slept in our room, and Kai said, "Granddad, I'm so glad we're in here with you." Next morning, we showed them the city. Even though things had changed so much, there were still some things that were familiar to Ron, especially when we went into the Hong Kong Chinese restaurant. We walked in the door, and Ron stopped and said, "I remember this." Nothing had changed, not even the posters on the walls. The many beggars were upsetting to Vivian. She said, "Ron, you need to go to the bank and get more money so we'll have enough to give them." We explained that we couldn't give to everyone, but it really tugged at her heartstrings. Many of the pastors invited us to their homes for Injera Bawat. Ron loved it just as much as he did when he was 4 years old, but it was a different story for the rest of the family. Vivian had some trouble with her stomach, but when she saw how much garlic and onions that our worker put in the stew, she understood her problems. We went to Tesfaye Gosa's home for dinner. You remember he was the blind man who was saved in our early years in Ethiopia. He was now a pastor, and Ron remembered him very well. It was a great delight for Ron to play on the same folding pump organ that he learned to play the piano on in Desi when he was 5 years old. One of the missionaries had given it to Tesfaye before the revolution, and he had managed to keep it. What a blessing to us. We took several trips outside of Addis, which they enjoyed very much. On one trip, we drove down to a small resort area on a day trip. There was a restaurant, a swimming pool, and places to stay. There were lots of monkeys, which they fed until they were suddenly surrounded by them, and it became too much. That afternoon, we watched the kids swim while Ron and Vivian went on a walk. I knew my dad was back in the hospital, and I wondered how he was doing. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Ethiopian time, and I said to Jean, "I have the strongest feeling I will soon be hearing from my dad." After a long day, we returned to Addis. We stopped to eat, and by then it was early evening. In fact, we saw some hyenas along the way. That just added another element to Kai and Isla's visit to Africa. We finally made it home about 8 o'clock in the evening, and as soon as we came into the house, the phone rang, and it was my sister-in-law who said, "Your dad passed away at 7 o'clock this morning. With the difference in time zones, he entered heaven while I had spoken to Jean sitting beside the pool." I immediately began to pack a bag to catch the flight leaving for the States that very night. We only lived 10 minutes from the airport, but I was not allowed to take that flight because immigration had closed for the night. No amount of persuasion would change things. We went to bed and we heard my plane fly over our house. Jean was able to get me a flight on another airline the next day. It was a long flight home, though I had peace in my heart, knowing that I had said goodbye to my dad in July and told him how much I loved him. Now I could say in my heart, "I'll see you in heaven, Daddy." I stayed 2 months with my mom and brother. We had some wonderful times together talking about Daddy's love for the Lord, for his family and friends, and of course, his great sense of humor. Jean remained behind in Addis with Ron and the family since they had another week on their ticket. We are so grateful that God allowed them to come to Ethiopia for a visit. We will always treasure the time we had together. I hope these stories will help you to understand a little better the personal lives of your missionaries. They have families with health problems and other issues, and even though they are involved in ministry, they're never far away in their minds from the family they left in the States. They have the same worries and cares that you have here at home. They just have to deal with it living in a different country. This is Podcast 21. I hope this has helped you understand missionary life a little better. These podcasts come out each Wednesday, and we look forward to more podcasts about our ministry in Ethiopia.